Well, friends, welcome to this edition of our One Thing video blog. This one's going to be a little different, and I got to say, a little scary because I invited a bunch of my colleagues along, and when they're together, I never know where things are going to go. We realize that during these uncertain times, we swim in the waters of conversation and decisions on a daily basis. But for many of you, you're not on the inside track. And so we know that there are lots of questions about what this campus closure means and what the future looks like and how we're thinking about reopening. You know, there's so much happening in churches across the country, and people have such different ideas about all of this. Many of those ideas strongly held and oppositional to one another. And so we wanted to have an opportunity to sort of have a dialogue about where we are and what we're thinking. I'll tell you, here's what I learned. Most of the folks that you see on this screen were joined by a few others in my office back in March as we had probably an hour to 2 hour conversation about whether we needed to close our campus. And that was hard. We weren't all on the same page. We wrestled with one another, but we came to consensus. And I think we sort of all left that room thinking we'd be back in a few weeks. As hard as that decision was, I think we are finding that it is so much harder to think about all the complexities of reopening our campus, how and when and why, and how to listen to all the data. And so we want to delve into some of that, and you are welcome to add your questions to the questions section, whether you're watching this on YouTube or our Facebook page. Just add on, and we'll be try to be diligent about answering those questions. So with that, I'm going to start with a question, and I'm going to ask each of my colleagues here that question, and I'll also take the opportunity to introduce them, because if you're from Prince of Peace, obviously you probably recognize these faces, but if you're not, you don't know them at all, and you should, because most of them are pretty awesome. So here's the question. What has this pandemic been like for you, especially as it relates to ministry? And so I'm going to start with Dr. Mark Slaughter, who is our Director of Worship Arts. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks. It's good to be with you guys. And I think probably for me, there's been some amazing gifts in this time of just kind of reflecting on life and on spirituality and my own personal walk with the Lord and what that's been like through this pandemic. It's definitely had highs and lows. But ministry in general has just been, we call it a pivot. It's just constantly, we thought we were going one direction, and we had to change and make a new direction. So it's been a season of a lot of learning and trying to figure out how we do worship and how we do church virtually. So a lot of times trying to figure things out, a lot of meetings, a lot of Zoom calls, and then just the longing that I have in my own heart to be away from everybody, not seeing folks on a weekly basis and not being able to kind of do life together has been a really challenge for me. Personally, I'm an extrovert. I love crowds, I love being with folks, and it's been really hard to experience the isolation that the pandemic has caused.
Yeah, thanks. Soon to be Reverend Jason Cramey, going to be our pastor of spiritual formation. Jason, what's it been like for you? You're muted, by the way. This is how our Zoom meetings go. Unmute yourself.
It's usually the boomers that forget to unmute themselves, so I'm slightly embarrassed.
Ouch.
Ouch. So like 13 months ago, moved into a new house, and it was an awesome experience, and loved being in a new space. But the funny thing about it, if you've ever done that, moved into a new house, is everything's in a different spot. My dresser was in a different spot, the closet was a different spot, the bathroom was in a different spot, the kitchen, the coffee, the garage, everything. And so it took a long time for us, we're still trying to figure out where the silverware drawer is at, to like get into that unconscious rhythm of just floating through the house to get things done. And it's like an additional 13% of brain power that goes into every single day to do just normal stuff. And same thing's happening, I think, in ministry for the most part. For example, unmuting my microphone. Zoom, it's just like, why can't I just talk to people? It's just a lot of different ways of going about similar things. In addition to that, learning many different skills that I didn't have before this all started. And, there was a funny feeling coming into this whole deal where I felt like, I shared this in my One Thing blog the other day, I felt like I knew what I would probably need for the future for ministry. And was right on some of that, but wrong on some of that. And so it's just learning new skills, new patterns of life. And yeah, I think lastly, it's just getting comfortable with where I'm at and not being so caught up in where I'm not, and just trying to embrace this moment.
Thanks, Jason. Amy Ustrick, our Director of Community Life. What's it been like for you?
It has certainly been a challenge for me. So a lot of my role is small groups and hospitality, most of which happen in the building. And so it's been a huge challenge to think about how we are welcoming, how we're hospitable online, and what that looks like versus being in our building. It's been a challenge for a lot of our small groups to shift to being totally digital. So a lot of them are still meeting on Zoom, which is great, but I know they're itching to be in person. So it has definitely been a challenging time in terms of my work here. And then personally, I've been planning a wedding. So I'm getting married in October. And let me tell you, planning a wedding during a pandemic is not very fun. And I'm a planner and I am a detailed person. So to be in this constant state of unknown, it's really hard for me personally and professionally, because I want to plan things out. I want to make plans. I want to keep people safe. And at the same point, it's like, I don't know where we're going from here. So it's been a trying time, but it's been a nice time to just be at a little bit of a slower pace too, and really have time to think through that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Amy. Pastor Sandy Ross-Schiller is our pastor of spiritual care. Sandy, what's it been like for you?
Well, with spiritual care, I do a lot of one-on-one conversations, and I love being able to sit down with someone and just see their expressions and be able to talk to them. And I haven't been able to do that as much. I've used the phone a lot, email some. It's been really hard. I just miss the connecting with spiritual care, walking with people through some of these issues that they're having. The interesting thing is since we've all been at home, we kind of walk through it together. So I've just appreciated being able to contact and be with the people as best as I can for right now. Just thankful for the phone, thankful for Zoom, so that I can connect in the best way I can. But I miss it. I miss seeing everybody.
Thanks, Sandy. Pastor Paul Gautier, our pastor of Life Transitions. What's it been like for you?
Well, it's a good thing that I've done a fair bit of thinking about and studying about the impact and effects of change and transition, not only in individuals but groups and all of that. I think personally, it's been a mixture of sort of angst and excitement, just the way I'm wired. More excitement for what's coming, but I've had to really work hard at being honest about my angst, and quite frankly, there have been days where I got to the end of the day and I just thought, what did I do today that was helpful to anybody? And there've been lots of days where I didn't know how to answer that question. So I think it's been a good time to deal with how I deal with change and transition. Change and transition is hard enough when everybody's rhythms are sort of set and we know it's coming. Like what Jason said, it's you sort of know where the drawers are, where the fabric softener is, but when it's like on a global level and lots of people are wondering about how do we manage this. It's been a creative time, but it's also been energizing, but it's also been a big challenge. And I think it's good for us to acknowledge that and live into that. I think, one of the really energizing things for me and for our team is just learning to do, the familiar things in some really unfamiliar ways. And, I think for most of, for me, that's what gets me, from one day to the next. I'm going to learn something new today. So that's kind of where I'm at.
It dawned on me a while back that there may be some people that think because the building's closed, we're all laying around getting a tan, there's no work to do. And let's just clarify. This has been an incredibly intensive time of learning, growing, and working. And our staff's been just burning the candle at both ends. So just really grateful for all of you and all that you're doing. Mark, so many of our disciples are just dying to be back in community and in worship in particular together. And one of the questions that we hear a lot from folks, and sometimes it's just curiosity, and sometimes there's an edge to the question is, hey, if other churches are worshiping live already, how come we're not? And how do you respond to that?
Let me unmute. First of all, I think it's a fair question. I think a lot of people are asking that question of their local congregations because obviously some churches have chosen to jump back in quickly and get things going and gathering, and other churches have chosen not to. But for me, I would agree. I want to be together for worship too. I long to be together to express our worship to God, to be able to pray together, to hear amazing preaching, to celebrate the sacraments. So I long to see people and to interact. So I get it, and I am with you. I want us to be together. I think about as I was preparing this question, just thought through, I think about the book of Proverbs. There's a couple of verses in there that really spoke into what I was thinking. In Proverbs 11, it says, "For a lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." And then a little further down, that same chapter 11, it says, "The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives." First of all, I guess I was thinking that, I trust our executive team and our board of directors. They operate from a pool of wisdom that seeks to protect this congregation and to give guidance and leadership. I also believe that Scripture encourages us to be wise and to live a life filled with righteousness, which will ensure that we operate from wisdom that comes from prayer and really comes from seeking the Holy Spirit's guidance. And I think that's what we've been doing. There are churches that are choosing to gather and worship, and the risk is high both for the congregants and for their leadership. I understand their desire to be back together in the sanctuary, but I also know that there's some wisdom in waiting, and the decision is so complex. And if you don't think so, look at schools and how difficult their decision has been, or other entities that are trying to figure it out. It's just a very complicated thing. And for us at Prince of Peace, I feel like we've chosen the side of being sure we can keep people safe. My love for the people of Prince of Peace in this amazing congregation compels me to do everything I can do to keep everyone safe, even if it's frustrating or it seems unnecessary. I guess I just am committed to providing a worship experience that's meaningful and allows us to gather in community to set our hearts and our affections upon our Creator God. And we'll do this really soon, but for right now, I just don't feel like it's safe for us to do so. And so when it is, I'm going to be the first one in that door. I cannot wait for those moments to be back together as the body of Christ.
Yeah. Certainly one of the things that we've heard is, why aren't we doing outdoor worship? That's such a part of our history, and that would allow us to do it in a seemingly safer way. Why have we chosen not to do that?
Well, obviously outdoor worship is a part of our history. It's a great thing to experience, particularly on a beautiful day in Minnesota. I love gathering together in this more casual atmosphere. I love being outside in the nature. We spent several weeks dialoguing about the possibility of having a couple of outdoor services this summer. And actually, I was really in favor of doing this. But when we began to really consider the logistical concerns that would be necessary to keep everyone safe and still provide a meaningful worship service, the challenges were really on par with just kind of going back into the sanctuary. Some of the things we thought about were, how are we going to keep everybody 6 feet apart? What if someone shows up and they don't have a mask? What if someone who attends becomes ill with COVID? And how would we respond, and how would we notify everybody? Our media arts staff are working literally just 50 to 60 hour weeks, overwhelmed right now with doing our online worship service. How can we ask them to provide now an outdoor worship venue with all their other things that they're doing? What about restroom facilities? How can we limit the attendance to 250 people? And I mean, just the questions are so vast and so many. Once again, we just had to make a really difficult decision. And I mean, it seemed like it was going to be easy at the beginning, but then when you started thinking about everybody that's going to be involved and how do we make it all happen, it just seemed the best call was to wait.
You know, Mark, if I could just jump in on that, you know, one of the things that you said that I wouldn't want to skip over too quickly is that that these decisions are always made after a pretty long and detailed conversation with lots of people. I'll just say, just put this out there. I would imagine as the director of worship arts, that you probably get, I don't know, you probably get some heat from some people, you know, about because you're sitting in that director's chair. But it's not just you, it's our whole leadership staff, and we really own this all together. And so, you know, it's the proverb about many advisors, just that's just such wise stuff. And I would really want people to really embrace that, you know, we're not making decisions in a vacuum. We're really trusting the Spirit to guide a conversation. And frankly, you and the wider team have really done a remarkable job with that. So thank you.
I think it's also helpful to note we no longer have a physical space for outdoor worship on our campus, especially as things are under construction. And while some have suggested that we use the parking lot, we no longer have the equipment that we used to have to transmit that service into cars. And so, again, it seems so simple on the surface until we began to dig in further, and we did a lot of digging in before we decided that it probably just wasn't the right thing to do at the right time. And so we've been worshiping virtually. I don't know about my colleagues, but I missed the virtual worship service class in seminary. That was not something I studied. And so we've all been scrambling with this. But it does sort of raise the question, what biblical basis would we have for worshiping in that way? And I'll open that question up to any of my colleagues. Don't all jump at once. This is exactly what happens in all of our meetings, a question and who's going to answer first?
I love show and tell. You know, I excelled at that in third grade. So, you know, I think, you know, when I think about how the early church must have done this, you know, it started with a small group, and they just figured, oh, this is such good news. We really have to share this. I think of the book of Acts and how they took the good news of Jesus Christ from, you know, village to town to city, and they got in boats and they moved. Every move to share the good news of Christ was taken it to some new level that they hadn't really explored before. And I think, you know, it feels kind of exciting to be sort of an Acts kind of church that way. And just, you know, we're not content to just share the good news with us four and no more. It's really for all people. And if we're going to continue to reach out at and beyond Prince of Peace, then we really have to be thinking off the map. And I trust that we're doing that. It's my 2 cents.
One of the things we learned too was about most of the time we've been operating from a micro kind of congregational mindset, which means we do ministry for our congregation, for the people of Prince of Peace. And what we discovered is that online worship gives us more of a macro approach, the bigger church, because now we have people, you know, all over the country, all over the world. We're not sure how far it goes, but you know, there are people that are engaging with worship in ways with us that haven't. And I think Prince of Peace has a unique message. We have a unique perspective that we see on theology and our belief in God and how that impacts everyone else. If, you know, if I had to like choose a passage, one of my favorite passages when I talk about worship, and I think it applies here, is in Romans 12 and those first two verses where Paul says, he talks about us offering our bodies to God as a living and a holy sacrifice, the kind that God will find acceptable. And this is truly the way we worship God. And then he goes on to say in verse 2, he says, don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And then you'll learn to know what God's will is for you, his good, perfect, and pleasing will. And I certainly think that we are seeking to make online worship an opportunity for everyone to continue to offer their lives as living sacrifices. This is how we truly worship God. We're not sacrificing people's lives by potentially putting them in a situation where they might not be safe, or I might not be safe, or someone else, our volunteers, might not be safe. But what we're really seeking to do is the work of transformation, where the Holy Spirit has an opportunity to work in our ways, and ways that maybe would have never ever happened before, because our reach is different than it's ever been before. I think online worship, it's different. It's non-conventional. It's not how we've always done it. It's offering ourselves to God. That is what our worship is. And hopefully the online worship is allowing all of us to be able to continue to connect with God in worship. And I totally understand that it's not like in-person worship, for sure, but we're working hard, and we are so dedicated to making the online experience as transformational as possible. And so I would just encourage everyone to dedicate some time, some uninterrupted time, to watch and to participate, to feel free to sing along, to respond to the Spirit through our online worship, to pray, to hear the Word of God, to take those next steps, and to live into this in your life, and make it a sacrificial gift of worship to God, which I think can still really speak into our lives, and be just a huge blessing for our congregation during this difficult season.
Dang, that was a sermon. We need to take an offering now.
Ditto what Mark said, but like Paul, I was also good at show and tell in third grade, and so I brought a prop. No, I put out some Bibles on the shelf there, and I think it's important to remember what the Bible is and what it's not. The Bible is a place where you can come to have an experience of the Word of God in Jesus Christ. It is there for you to have that experience on your own and with a community. The Bible is not a manual for how to have a worship service inside of an enclosed building with a group of your closest friends in all times and in all places. And so I think we just need to get set on what the main thing is sometimes, and why the church exists, to gather around that good news in the first place. It's to help people to have an encounter with Jesus, to help people understand what that encounter means for their lives and their relationships. It is not to create a spectator or an experience inside of a building somewhere. And you can look all over Scripture, and worship's happening in all kinds of different ways and in places. Jesus drags his disciples all over the place to show them what following him is all about. And very, very rarely, and actually it's the contentious ones that happen inside of a synagogue or a temple. All the good stuff happens out and about. So I think we're just in a unique situation right now. And just because the format in which we are accustomed to is there and all around us, I think sometimes it's forcing us to ask some anachronistic questions about what it means to be the church that the Bible's just not set up to answer in the first place. So we can let ourselves off the hook in that way.
Great. I was just going to add, as much as we all absolutely love being in worship, and there's just that sense and of being together in a community, I think sometimes it's during these hard times, and I think it's hard for everybody that we can't be in worship. I know it is. It's hard for everyone. Sometimes that's when we grow, and we can maybe see things. We're doing eyes wide open right now. We can see things differently, and maybe some of that online worship, while it's not our what we want right now, but it's what we can do. And how can I grow from that? How can I be different? How do I see God in a way I maybe never had before? And I think that really opens me up. I know that my husband and I sit down after every worship and talk about it. And we don't do that when we're in the sanctuary always, but man, we have an opportunity to do that. So that's one of the things it's given me. So I'm trying really hard to find the good and the positive, knowing that what I want is one day being back, which we all do. But in the meantime, sometimes it's during the hardest times of things that we grow the most. So it's kind of where I'm at.
So true. So we've referenced the fact that we know that a lot of our folks are disappointed that we're not back in worship. We long for that. We miss it. But we've also probably all had encounters with some of our members who are just angry that we haven't reopened the building. And that, sometimes that's just a response of grief in people. But it's important that we respond. So let me ask Paul, how would you respond to someone who is deeply disappointed, grieving, maybe even overtly angry that we have not yet opened up our campus again?
That's a really great question, and I think you began to tap right into it. I think ultimately our responses of frustration and maybe anger and whatever moves us to write an email that that we probably should have slept on and before we send it, or whatever, is really because of grief. The amount of loss that people are experiencing in this time. On the whole spectrum, from and I don't mean to minimize anything, from the I can't get a roll of toilet paper on the one hand, all the way over to the death of a loved one or someone that we know. There's all of that is going to elicit a lot of response. And if somebody called me or whatever and they were frustrated or they were angry, I get it. I totally do. We just acknowledge that's an appropriate response of grief to all of this. I'm disappointed too. To be honest, I haven't gotten the email. Nobody's really just unloaded on me who's been really angry, but I certainly understand that response. But I want to understand where that's coming from. Discomfort in my own life is usually met with my own frustration and anger, and it's usually because I'm not thinking beyond myself. So I guess if I was sitting down, on a Zoom call or, physically distanced from someone and they were angry, I'd want to just talk about why that's hooking them, why that's hooking us, and try to understand the process. But I just want to acknowledge that there's a remarkable amount of loss. Working with a group of seniors in high school this past year, the amount of things that they have not been able to do that for a dozen years they've been wanting to do. And particularly just as an aside, those young people were born right after the 9/11 event. And so they were born into a culture that's dealing with lots of frustration, lots of anger, lots of loss. And now they're about to step into the second third of their life and this. And, there's a lot of loss. So I think it goes back to grief and just helping people understand grief. I get it.
Jeff, I was just going to add, on the other hand of that, I work with a lot of our seniors, and they're so thankful that we're not meeting. I get a lot of thank yous, actually, that we're not meeting and that we care enough about them to not meet. So there's the other side of that.
You mean we've made that decision because we care for people and not because we all wanted the weekend off?
Yeah, it's been actually, I've heard that so many times. Thank you for not doing. Thank you. Yeah. So there's that too.
Well, and I don't think this is a surprise to people, but I'll just say it. All of us on staff are just dying to be back together in the worshiping community. We just all miss that desperately, which makes the decision-making process all that more challenging. Jason, what were you going to say?
Gautier and I were talking last week about being in person again. And for those of you that come to WOW, you have no idea how much I can't wait to have a microphone so that I can hop onto the stage and shout, "Hello!" You have no idea how much I can't wait to do that again.
I can wait. I can wait.
Yeah, I could have waited a while longer.
No.
Only because you've been practicing with all of us.
Right.
Hello.
I do it with my kids at home. Not nearly as awesome.
So
I don't think I'd add, Jeff, is that for me, I can self-differentiate when people send me frustrating emails or I'm not going to take it personal. I mean, I feel it with them, but I know they're not. I don't feel like they're angry at me, and so we're more than willing to dialogue with people that do need to share concerns or frustrations. And I think we try to respond. I mean, a lot of times people have said things that have actually changed how we do things, and so we're open for feedback. We're open for thoughts and ideas or suggestions that people have on how we can do things. All that's all good information for us, and we want to. I always think about worship as the work of the people. That's what liturgy means. It's all of us working together to express to God what it is we believe and how we want to worship Him. And so that's why it's always beneficial and valuable for feedback and constructive concerns or whatever that people want to share. And it doesn't. I mean, it might sting a little bit, but again, we're differentiating enough to say it's not directed at me personally. It's good information, and we're going to take it. We're going to process it.
As we so often say, it's more fodder for the hopper and helpful. So despite the fact that the campus is not yet reopened, that does not mean that we are not spending an inordinate amount of time thinking about when we do and what that will look like, and trying to learn from others, contingency plans, and how we move forward. So Amy, when we do open up, how are we going to keep people safe? What happens if someone in the worshiping community tests positive for COVID after having been in worship? What's that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. And I'll just echo what others have said. I mean, we started meeting to have conversations about this in April. I mean, we are not taking this lightly. We're really trying to think through the details, the logistics of it all. That's where I live. So we certainly have plans for all of this. I mean, at this point, anytime we have any staff in the building, any volunteers come in to do worship recordings, things like that, everyone's masked, everyone is checking in. And we'll see some of those things similar when we do open again. We'll have to do contact tracing because that's what's recommended at this point. So we'll need to know who's in the building, make sure that they're healthy when they come in the door, things like that. I mean, we're closely following the recommendations from the CDC, from the state of Minnesota, keeping an eye on all of that to make sure we know what that takes for people to be here. And it's going to look really different. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not going to be the place that it was when we left in March. It's going to have a different feel. We're thinking through so many things that have to change. Can we serve coffee right away? Probably not. That's not very sanitary for everyone at this point. And so what does it look like? How is the community going to feel a little bit different? So, there's so many details I could bore you with. But we're thinking about, do we even have bulletins? Is that sanitary? How do we do communion? How do we do offering? I mean, there's just so many layers to everything that we're doing. And that's part of why we're still where we are, because we don't feel confident yet that we really know the answers to that. We have talked about it more than I can even tell you, but we're still making sure that we're making the right choices and really thinking about that. So we do also have a designated room that will be a quarantine room. So if we have a student in CDLC or in family ministry that gets sick that needs to get picked up, we have a space that they can go to kind of be away from everyone else until their ride gets here. Some of that, I mean, we're really trying to think through all the different possibilities.
I take a little bit of comfort if schools and major league sports and college sports and universities can't figure this all out. Maybe we can give ourselves a little grace as well.
I think so. Yeah,
it's complicated stuff. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think as Amy said, it's going to look different. Our sanctuary obviously holds 1,400 people, and only 250 people are going to be able to gather in that space, and so. We've already taken all the chairs out. We only have 250 chairs in there. I mean, we're we're ready. We're ready for it to happen when the time comes. And so, but it's like, what will the worship experience be like is really is concerning to me as a person that helps craft and cultivate that experience. So I want to do it when we feel like we can make the worship services meaningful and helpful for people, where folks can truly enter in and worship. Those are the things that I'm looking at and trying to consider. And it's just there are a lot of logistical concerns about singing, about greeting each other, and all those things that we do as a part of our normal patterns of worship that we'll have to do differently. And we want to be really mindful about how those things are going to how we're going to be doing those things moving forward.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of waving and air hugs, right? Another piece that I was just going to mention too is that in terms of beyond Sunday morning, thinking about all the different groups that usually meet in our space, we're really taking a look at that schedule and making sure there's enough time to sanitize rooms between when groups meet. Do we need to shift some timing around? Do we need to make meeting times a little bit shorter? Stuff like that. We're working on all of those details as well. So that's beyond the Sunday morning piece, but we're certainly considering those groups as well.
Yeah, thanks. Sandy and Paul, what about pastoral acts? What about a baptism, weddings, funerals, pastoral care? How's that looking?
Well, I'll just start with some funeral situations. So we're also following right now the state of Minnesota. That's been actually breaking my heart. That's been the hardest thing. A lot of people have just chosen to wait until they can have larger gatherings. I have met with just some family members outside, and in a group of less than 10. Just to be able to walk through them. So I know that I can speak for the entire pastoral staff that we will walk with you no matter what you're going through, especially in a death. And so please let us know when that happens. When it comes to a funeral, obviously we can't, our campus is closed. We can't have anything inside right now. But we're going to walk with you through it, and we're going to figure stuff out together. I guess that's the main thing. And to know that we're going to walk right. We won't leave you. We'll walk with you.
Yeah, I think the inability to gather like we did has added grief upon grief, and that makes everything a little more acute. And the families that I've interacted with have been remarkably gracious and understanding in the midst of that grief. And there's some learning there. There's some deep growth that happens there. But Sandy, you're exactly right. Somebody asked the question along the way, are we not doing funerals? And have we told people we're not doing them? And not at all. By and large, families have just decided to postpone or to wait to do the familiar thing in an unfamiliar way later. Had a couple burials at Fort Snelling, of course, were distanced and all of that. But yeah, it's a really emotional and deep time for families. As far as baptisms and weddings go, along with funerals, these are moments when people really have come together to celebrate and acknowledge the power of community. I think people haven't stopped having babies, and and we've gotten lots of calls, but everybody that's called about scheduling a baptism has been really content to just talk about what we're doing and content to wait until we can come together. I will say that I've done one baptism during this time, and I have another one coming up, and both of those baptisms have a medical issue connected. That is to say that maybe a family member, because of his or her medical condition, they just need to celebrate the baptism while their loved one can be with them. And so we have made that accommodation's been outside, distanced, and it seems odd to say this, but I've shared with families, hey, I'd love to spend some time just eating afterward and having a great time together, but I'll probably just come in, do this, and I have to be on my way because I need to protect myself and the next group of people that I might interact with. So all the weddings, I think I have 6 on my schedule, and 4 of them have been postponed a year. And the other 2, we're getting really creative, aren't we, Amy? Yeah. So everybody has just gotten to this different place of how can we do this differently? How can we do these, these familiar things in unfamiliar ways? And so everybody's been great about it. And I think part of that, a big part of that, is the enormous amount of trust that we have as a staff with one another and the congregation, that we all have together. I keep coming back to that day after day, the enormous amount of love and trust that we all have for each other. It's like, yeah, I get this. We can't do it like we did, but we're going to find a way at some point. And, so baptisms, weddings, funerals, that's a big part of that.
I know another thing that we're beginning to hear more and more of as we get close to the fall is around family ministry programming. And Jason, no doubt you're hearing some of the same things that we're hearing about worship. Hey, other places are doing some things in person. What are we doing, and why aren't we opening up? Well, what would you share about that?
Well, ironically, I have not gotten a single note from a family that has said, open up for family ministry. So maybe some people just haven't.
Now.
Yeah, maybe they're going to launch it from the outbox now. A lot of factors going into how we're approaching the fall, and actually, it's fun to be able to say that there's a few positive ones that are really shaping the conversation. And the first thing is that we just have a tremendous amount, because of the generosity of our community, we have a tremendous amount of resources that we can draw from to do digital ministry that other churches don't have. And so many other churches that are going back to campus to do ministry are sort of forced to do that because they're unable to do what we're able to do online. And so in family ministry, we are thankful that we get to share some staff and partner with Worship Arts, so those video production people. And one of these days, if you see Swen out in public, don't hug him, but give him an air high five, because he's been churning out just a tremendous amount of really fan video content for us. And so we haven't been forced into any unhealthy or dangerous choices. And a lot of that is just because our members have been super generous and have allowed us to have options. So we've, with our options, we have chosen not to do things that could cause harm. The second thing is maybe a little bit ironic given the first. So because of the generosity of the Prince of Peace community, we were able to actually move the needle on the One Church Capital campaign to transform our campus. A lot of that stuff's supposed to happen here soon. And so a lot of the churches that are going back to in-person ministry are smaller churches, many of them, not all of them. And if they're a large church, they have access to most of their campus. Now, on any given week in family ministry, we have more people on campus than most elementary schools have when they're operating normal capacity. It's a lot of people. And as we're finding out in the community, they're struggling with where to put kids and taking half the kids out and all this kind of stuff. And so we would be in a really sort of doubly difficult situation with various parts of our campus not being usable, and not in all, the size of our group. How do we get them on campus, and how do we do it safely? That's from drop off to pick up to getting them from the front door to the sanctuary and out. And so it's an awesome opportunity. It's a lot easier to do all this work on the campus when there's no people in the way. So that's number two. And I think number three is philosophically, moving in this direction was not a big problem for us. And so for those families that have been listening to us kick off the year and wrap up the year, we talk a lot about our ministry philosophy and family ministry being orange. And so what we're trying to do is combine the yellow light of the gospel and the red love of the home into Art Major's orange. And so we're trying to partner with families. And perhaps there's never been a season where it's been more necessary for families to meet us in that work than this one. And so we've been doing our best work to provide families with a combination of video, worship experiences, and resources to do just that. And we're working behind the scenes to figure out how to coach and how to walk alongside of families to the best of our ability. But we really want to use this season to double down on that because we believe in it. And it's just never made more sense than it does right now to really push on that ministry philosophy. And so that's I think the third reason why we chose not to do in-person ministry to begin with this fall.
Anything you can or want to share with us about moving forward? What's the future looking like, as uncertain as that is?
Yeah, similar to what Amy is working through on her end, there's been a lot of thought exercises and experiments that we've been running for the past 5 months. And if I had to sum it up in sort of one catchphrase, small is the new big. Things are gonna start small, contained, traceable, and manageable. Small groups. Similar to the way that the state opened back up. That's probably how we're going to open back up. And we're waiting to see how things go with the schools in the fall. So some of the possible scenarios would be that we'd lead with student ministry first with smaller groups. We have a large student ministry, so we can't get everybody on campus all at once. But maybe we start with some smaller groups at the beginning. But in the meantime, we'll be providing a weekly children's ministry worship service that you can catch along with parent resources you can download. We've already recruited all the small group leaders for student ministry this year, including the new ones we're going to need for our new 6th graders. And we'll have a weekly worship experience, and we're coaching those small group leaders on how to do small group digitally. And so no matter how things shake out in the end, we're going to continue to do ministry in the meantime and be flexible together. Just like you're going to have to be parents everywhere else. We're one more place. And I've got 2 kids going to 2 different schools with 2 different schedules and totally different needs. And so I get it. I'm right there with you. And, thanks for your grace and your patience up to this point and in the future in advance as we continue to figure this stuff out.
In addition to the things that we've mentioned, are there other ways for people to stay connected during this time? Anything that you want to throw out there?
Just that we're accessible. We're not gone. You can call us, you can email, you can meet us for coffee. That we're available to people to interact, to help them through this process, to answer questions, to be a pastor, to be a shoulder, to however we can help folks, that we're available, and we would welcome those opportunities to engage with folks in a one-on-one basis.
The campus is closed, but ministry is still happening. And if people email us, we respond. If you call the church office or call our direct office line, even though most of us are not in the office, that gets sent to us so that we're aware that somebody's called and we can get back to you. And so we would encourage people to utilize that as there's need.
And I think it's worth noting, similar to other things that families are involved in, if you're a family with children, we need you to register so we know you're coming and we know to even reach out to you. If you've got a student, we need you to register so that we know that you're coming and that we can reach out to you and make sure that you get stuff. It's silly, or I don't know, it's not silly, but it's ironic, or maybe it was surprising to find out that we need to know who's involved maybe more so now than when you were right in front of us, so that we can be strategic about how we get things to you and about how we communicate with you. So registration is live for family ministry, so go get it on the website.
It's also a great season and a great time to invite neighbors and others to be a part of that process, which is a great segue, I think, into one of the last questions that I want to ask. It's been so easy to focus on what we've lost during this pandemic, but every crisis also opens doors to opportunity. So what opportunities have you discovered, and have we discovered along the way?
You know, what I've loved is I've moved into a new neighborhood, and I've been sharing our online services with all my neighbors. And it has been such a gift because, number one, we can have conversations about our faith. And what a great way to start. And it's been absolutely wonderful. So I've really found a great thing in being able to share. And then it reaches out. And in fact, we were at a neighbor's the other night, and I had met this guy's brother, and then I saw his brother again, and he said, "Hey, I've been watching your services online." So it's not only my neighbor, but my neighbor's family. So it's been pretty neat.
I think just new mindsets, new ways of envisioning the church, new ways of being the church. I have friends around the area, around the country that their congregations are so big that they might have a couple of sites. They'll say, "Yeah, we're a 2-site church," or we're a 3-site church. What I've loved to say about Prince of Peace is that Prince of Peace is we've got about 3,500. We're a 3,500 site church, because the church is the people, and wherever people are, that's where the church is. That's where the church is active. So Sandy and your community, you've been the church to your neighbors. Now they're being church for others. And ultimately, to put it this way, we're all playing for the same team. We just have different expressions, different flavors, different colors of the hues of the way that we do things. And so I think helping people think outside the box, that's a new way of seeing ourselves. That's been really, really fun for people.
Anything else y'all want to add?
Well, it has allowed us to unleash some creativity in ways that we couldn't do in a physical building. And we hope that's been helpful and engaging for people. It's also forced us to look at what we do in worship and how do we enhance that experience for folks. Again, I think when you're in the normal fray of weekend worship, you get kind of in the same rhythms, and so it's been good for us to reconsider how we do worship, what's important to us in worship, and we welcome your comments and your feedback if you have things that you're longing for, or you miss, or you want to experience. We'd be grateful to hear those things as well.
So let me just be clear with folks who are interested. The decision-making processes about the campus pretty much work like this. Jane Victory, our Director of Finance, and I are the executive team for the church, and we report to the Board of Directors. And so we bring recommendations to the board, and the board comes to consensus on those decisions. Jane and I try and listen carefully to our staff, to what's happening in science, in the government, and certainly to the Holy Spirit, and to what's happening in other places, other congregations, schools, and other organizations to make the decisions that we do. Right now, we have decided, with the board's approval, that we will open our preschool because these young children need socialization, and it's a contained opportunity for us to reopen and to explore education and ministry in the facility. And so that will start this fall. The Mission Outpost is beginning to expand its operations, and then right now is training more volunteers to do that in as safe a way as possible. Our dental clinic is also opening and seeing patients through a massive process of developing a plan for safety. And in October, we are planning to have some of our student small groups meeting in the facility, again, starting small so that we can do that in a contained fashion, in a limited fashion. and we'll learn from those experiences how to be as safe as we can be. We will be re-evaluating whether we move into live worship toward the end of this month of August, and probably looking into, is October a safe time and place to do that? And we'll continue to evaluate that on an ongoing basis. And so we ask for your prayers. For discerning wisdom. We want to do the right thing for the right reasons, for the best of the congregation and for the safety of our staff as well. And I will tell you that your generosity, which has been remarkable during this time, has allowed us to do the kind of ministry that we do. I'll also say this, that the opportunities that this pandemic has opened in terms of digital ministry that reaches well beyond our physical campus is going to open up some new opportunities that will also need new funding. And so if you're not a regular sustaining member at Prince of Peace giving on a regular basis, this is a phenomenal time to step in at an opportunity on the ground floor of a whole new way of doing ministry in our life together that's going to reach people in a whole new way, whole new generations of people hearing the good news and growing in the good news. And so I would urge you to be thoughtful about that. And I'll end with this. I say this to their faces. I'll say this to those who are online with me now in front of you all. We are blessed, Prince of Peace, with the finest staff on the planet. We have spectacular, dedicated, loving, faithful staff who have pivoted on a dime, have given of themselves selflessly so that our ministry isn't just surviving. It's thriving. And so I'm grateful to Jason and Mark and Amy and Sandy and Paul for joining me in this call, and to all of our staff who are not on this call. And again, to all of you as our disciples. We may not be together physically, but the Spirit keeps our hearts and our lives woven together. So thanks for tuning in. If you have questions, if you have comments, write them all down, send us an email. However you want to communicate, we're grateful to be in touch with you. Thank you all, and God's blessings.